All right. Today's talk, I will say, is pivotal if you want to live the best version of you and experience a life of total fulfillment. This talk is based on my work with over 1,800 clients, most of them very successful clients over a 20-year period. So before I get too deeply in this topic, I'm going to say this is really a rough draft of the topic. I know today I'm just going to cover the big picture, some foundational principles, is because I'm still fleshing out some of the more refined ideals and details about this particular subject. But I think it was important enough to get started on this, and plus it's forcing me now to start developing content around here. So one of my foundational principles when I work with a client is I always see them as more magnificent than they realize. And that even includes working with some of my more successful clients, because I've had clients that have built $100 million or more companies. I've had clients in the medical field that have built medical devices that changed the course of medicine in their area of expertise. I've worked with world-class athletes. I've worked with a broadcaster on a national news network. I've worked with a lot of superstars. And my belief is when you come into this world, that you have all the resources you need to fulfill your mission or your purpose for your life. To me, this is your default or true north of that you have to consistently stay associated to, because there's a lot of things that could pull you away from that. And the more that you cultivate those resources, the more your magnificence shines through. And let me be clear, this is just my belief. And after working with over 1,800 clients, based on my own personal experience, it's also based on my own life and mistakes I've made, because early in my life, I didn't realize I had this magnificence in me. And so in later in my life, I've learned this. And I'm also okay if you don't subscribe to some of these beliefs. That's okay. Fortunately, it's my call, so I get to sort of go over what I know to be true. And so here is my first question for you all. What percentage of people do you know that you think are truly magnificent? Or what percentage of people do you believe really tap into their true magnificence? Think about that for a moment. I, I don't have hard and fast numbers on what the percentages are. I just know from my experience working with a lot of people and a lot of very successful people that very few people tap into their magnificence or ever experience it. And these, again, this is for me working with really successful clients. And I know in working with them, we've been able to get them to go so much farther. So then the question is, well, how can that be if my assumption is correct that we come into this world with every resource that we need to be magnificent? How is it that very few of us ever live it? And many people go to their grave never even scratching the surface of what they truly are capable of doing. My short answer, and you already sort of know from the title, is what I find: few people master their ability to deal with discomfort. And if you do not master that skill, you will never tap into your true magnificence. So in the time we have today, I'm going to touch on four of the major areas that I've noticed in working with clients where I see comfort or different types of comfort that prevent them from tapping into their magnificence. And my goal today is lay down some foundational principles. And because I believe this topic is so important and has so much impact on people, I plan to do more calls where I'll go more in depth, and then I'll also go into how do you conquer some of the challenges that I'm going to bring up in today's call. So let's start off with the first one that I noticed in clients, where comfort gets in the way and can limit us, and that is ego. And what I mean by that is your ego is your ego's self-esteem is built on external validation. And for your ego to get that validation, it has to do what people want or what people expect. If it's going off and doing what people don't expect, it's not going to get validated. And the ego is very sensitive to what other people think, and and so as a result, it's going to maintain more of the status quo. It's not going to rock the boat. And because of this, the ego tends to be risk averse. So, needless to say, you're never going to tap into that magnificence if you're risk averse. And then the challenge becomes extracting yourself from the ego and getting to the point where you don't worry about what others think of you, and you're willing to fail and do different things that it's going to require, where you're not going to get that validation, requires you to deal with discomfort. So that's one key, is you have to break the gravitational pull of the ego, which requires you to go into some discomfort. Your ego is not going to like it, and it's going to fight tooth and nail to keep you where you are. So the next key to tapping into your magnificence is your ability to make hard choices. And what I mean by that, choices where you put yourself on the line, choices where you bet on yourself, choices that involve risk, but calculated risk. That ability to discipline yourself to make those hard choices, very few people master it. And we tend to gravitate what is more easier and more comfortable. But my question is this, is do you know anyone in your life who you would say is really magnificent, and not counting your children, they get a free pass on this, that they always take the easy way out, and yet you would still classify them as magnificence? Not inherently magnificent, but how they're showing up in life. Someone who gives the least amount of effort, who never takes any risk, who, when they come home from work, sits on the couch, has a few beers, and watch TV all night. For me, my guess for you, you can't identify anyone that you classify as magnificence that follows that sort of life, and I can't either. On the other hand, think about the people that you would say are magnificent. My guess is they definitely get out of their comfort zone. They do extraordinary things. And I know in my experience, we're working with a lot of clients, the ones that I've found been the most magnificent, they consistently make hard choices in a lot of areas of their life. And I would say other people would say the same thing. And they tend to be, whether magnificent as a business owner, as a parent, as a husband, as a community member. It impresses me. And that's what I love about my job. You get to see the clues of life. Okay. Next area, I would say, of where comfort gets in the way as far as these categories, is that or robs you of your magnificence, is not taking the time to develop a practice of thinking deeply and clearly and just doing it. What you find is people, it's inherent in our nature, we have an aversion to thinking, much less thinking deeply, because it burns mental calories. And our mind is a cognitive miser. It feels like for it to survive, it's got to have everything available to it. So it doesn't want to spend calories on thinking that much. There's an inherent resistance to avoid thinking. And it's much easier to allow yourself to go on autopilot and just live your life. And what I find ironic is today, when I was thinking about today's topic, is I had an aversion to start putting some thoughts down about this. My mind wanted to do something I had a couple things that were going to be really fun to do today. And my mind's going, are you kidding me? Why would you do that? It's going to burn some calories. So, but, but if you take the time and you cultivate that discipline within yourself, and I'm fully aware of this, and especially in working with so many successful clients, that boy, you can't do anything more important than take the time to build your thinking muscles and cultivate a practice where you develop some think time, where it requires you to access more of the resources within you to cultivate your magnificence. And to me, where I stand today, which was different earlier in life, I see it as unconscionable to me not to become the best version of me and leave a lot of these awesome resources within me never utilized. Why settle for something less? Because you pay a price if you don't, and there's a tremendous reward if you put in the work. So, my final area where I find people get derailed by comfort and prevents them to stepping into their awesomeness is the need for certainty. And so I would say, to me, out of the four, this one's probably the biggest killer to your magnificence. And it's the reason why I put it last. It's probably, in working with a lot of clients, I see this one as the most pervasive one that prevents people from stepping up and being something unbelievable. And so if you are someone where you have to have absolute certainty that you're picking the right goal, or you have to have absolute certainty that you're headed in the right direction when you take on a big goal, or if you have to have absolute certainty that you're not going to fail, or you're going to have absolute certainty that people are going to approve of what your new ideal is, you are never, ever going to access the resources within you and never step into your magnificence that's begging you to access it. Only only when you're willing to go in the unknown and will you ever need to access all these other additional resources within you. Because if you're doing the same thing over and over and over every day and you get on autopilot, you don't need that many resources. It's only when you challenge yourself. But then the question becomes, if you're not utilizing all your resources, how magnificent are you going to be if you are a one trick pony that consistently does the same thing over and over and over again? So, as you think about today's talk, just take some time to reflect on the people that impress you most. I will bet what we talked about is they do the exact opposite of these four things. They definitely get out of their comfort zone on these four major areas. There are some other areas too, but this is the four I see the most common in the people that I've worked with. And so, as I mentioned today, my goal is just to lay out the foundational piece of this. I plan to do some additional talks about this and additional live streams. And eventually I'll get to some solutions of how to avoid this so you end up being the most magnificent person you can be. So anyway, I would love your feedback. Is like, this is still an area that I'm developing. And if you have any comments, feedback, please send them on. I'd love to hear your comments. Anyway, have an amazing rest of your day, and I'll see you on our next talk.